Hello, friends. It's Chapo.
By congressional Democrats, Senate Democrats, by Harris and Biden. I mean, there's not even a video of them walking over this.
Yeah, and they got to see the beta test a month ago. They literally said, hey, we're going to do this. And like I said, I've gone back and forth. It's like, was this a focus group attempt? Was this like to see how people would react? And they're like, actually, apparently nothing. And I think I landed on the fact that it was.
It absolutely was. The more I think about it, it's like everybody talked in the immediate aftermath of the first leak that it's like, well, this is a draft decision and Roberts is there. Who knows what, and maybe this is part of a negotiation process. And maybe it very well might have been that the thought was, okay, this is a bombshell. We're winning everything. Do we want to really fuck that up by like changing the rules, by forcing the Democrats into like, okay, accepting that the rules had changed? And that means that maybe they decide at that point, you know what, fuck the court. Or they like actually do make a move on judicial review, which is now like this bulwark of conservative power now. And if that happens, they'd be fucked because what are they going to do? They're the fucking Supreme Court. At the end of the day, they can make rulings, but they cannot enforce them. And they know that. And so there is that danger. Like maybe the Democrats find this to be the line in the sand. And so they figure, let's put it out there first. If they do like go shithouse at the prospect, then maybe that gives like Roberts the leverage to talk him down to some sort of like Casey-esque compromise. But when they dropped it and the Democrats did zero, except double down on January 6th, they knew, okay,
funding requests. Yeah.
Leave it as it is. Lock it in. 6-3, go for it. Alito, go ham, baby. Leroy Jenkins the shit out of this because nothing's going to happen. They will do nothing. And they're now they're being proven right every day.
Well, I mean, like, let's talk about like some of the things that now that it's happened, like the 1,000 cuts have paid off, and we live in this new reality where abortion and many forms of contraception are illegal in probably half of the country, with the threat of jail and death hanging over millions of women. I mean, what are some like? I mean, I've just looking here at AOC has been the one who's probably on the Democrats like the most vocal in terms of like demanding some kind of action in terms of. I'm just reading a list here: restrain judicial review, expand the court, clinics on federal lands, expand education and access to Plan C, repeal Hyde, hold floor votes codifying Griswold, Obergefell, Lawrence, Loving, etc., and vote on Escobar's bill protecting clinics. And she's demanding that they at least attempt or try to do some of these things. And I'm just wondering what your guys' thoughts on any of these potential like political counters to this, what I think is an untenable and unacceptable situation.
I'm a little confused by the clinics on federal lands. Like, we don't have the capacity to, like, the clinics that do exist are incredibly understaffed. Like, we don't have enough doctors in the first place.
Right, yeah. Yeah, no kind of like, hey, how about we start doing universal health care? It's like, we kind of had the opportunity to, in a crisis, switch to universal health care with COVID, and we decided not to. And if that wasn't going to do it, this isn't going to do it. Like, those wells are drain dry. So sorry. The money is gone. It's in the private sector. It's not for public use. So good luck. That's not happening.
Yeah, it just seems odd to me. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be like sort of two fronts. And like, obviously there's going to be the political front and then the relief front, and people are going to have to, hey, you got a car? There's a lot of driving people over state lines, and there's a lot of good organizations for that, and paying for things. I mean, the problem is that like this just literally isn't something that could exist without a formal medical infrastructure, ideally. Like, a lot of people sort of have this idea. It's like, oh, it's misoprostol. You can just take a pill. And it's like, that's like an abortion. Like, it's pretty safe as far as that stuff goes. Complications are rare, but you're looking at, you can have an allergic reaction to it. It might not abort fully. You can, have like a blood clot or get an infection or, all the things you can get from like getting your wisdom teeth out, basically. There is always a risk with stuff like that. So that means you might have to, even if you are able to whatever dark web misoprostol, which by the way is not appropriate for every abortion, you could have to go to the hospital, and then you're in a position where it's like, okay, well, what are your EMT's beliefs? Is your emergency room physician a snitch? Like, I think there's going to be, I mean, again, misoprostol does cover a lot of stuff, but it's still very dangerous in terms of like, well, on the really, I don't mean that the procedure is really dangerous. I mean that like on the off chance that say you just like are vomiting for 24 hours and you have to go to like get an antiemetic from, the fucking emergency room. Like, what are you? They're gonna be like, oh, why are you throwing up? They're probably gonna do a blood test, and they're gonna be like, oh, have you tried to do an abortion today? And like, no one wants to end up like Purvi Patel or Bebe Shui or, well, by the way, big Hoosier pride here. Both of those women were prosecuted in Indiana. Indiana has in many ways been the laboratory for prosecuting women for either attempting abortion or trying to kill themselves, which resulted in an abortion. I don't know, man. I think moving people around is like the immediate concern. But then in terms of the political stuff, I don't know how realistic it is as a short-term solution to like pack the courts. I mean, it's going to like take a while, and I don't think it's worth protesting the Republicans because they're just not on our side. If anything, we should be like haranguing the Democrats. You failed us. What the fuck are you good for? Get your shit together. We want some militancy from you. Like, they're the people we're able to make uncomfortable, not the fucking Republicans. They don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. Like, if you do think that there is anything the government could conceivably do to change this trajectory at this point on this, like to actually fight back on it, then you have to, I'm sorry, as much as the Democrats are absolutely fucking useless, they are just squatting on all the meaningful centers of power that exist like within the system. Because we're assuming that the system is perpetuating here, right? That we're not going to do a revolution. That's one thing. But if you're not doing that and you want to imagine like the system that we live in doing something better, then that means the Democrats have to change. And the only way to change them, as we've now seen, is to just essentially, harass them into obedience, cow them, intimidate them.
Look what the Tea Party did starting in about 2010.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it worked. Can anyone look at that and say it wasn't one of the most successful political movements of the last?
Yes. I mean, the question
because
is,
those people are less servile than your average like Democratic partisan.
Yeah.
I mean, the question is like, what does intimidate them really entail, like practically? And that's a real live question. I don't know the answer to it.
Well, especially because they don't seem to care.
Don't start imagining like
elections. Yeah.
Don't start with gaming out how you would do court packing. It's not going to happen. Yeah. Like those theoretical questions are so down the pike of you would need a completely different party to do that, and that means everyone has to do a lot of things between X and Y to even consider what court packing would look like.
Mm-hmm. As far as like immediate executive actions that could be taken, right? Because that is a gigantic concern, like a lack of medical infrastructure, a lack of personnel. The things that Biden could do require like a level of confrontation that not just he, but no Democrat that I can think of outside of maybe Big JB is comfortable with. I mean, okay, if you are ordering like the National Guard or the military at large to like transport women around, or ordering medical personnel from the military to perform procedures on women, you're absolutely going to get religious objections. You're going to get some fucking crybabies, and you have to be ready to throw them in prison. What Democrat's going to do that? Well, to do this, I mean, not even to get to, curtailing judicial review, which is like, I mean, I think that's the big prize item. But just immediate administrative action. It is a level of confrontation and aggression and just a certain baseline of fighting that I cannot picture any Democrat on the national scale.
But the thing is, it's not just because they're cowards. It's not a personal. It's not a problem. It's not like that they are just bad and weak people. They certainly are. But in addition to that, they're operating in a context where they know in their bones that if they raise the stakes by like starting to break the rules the way Republicans do, and the way that like left liberal columnists are always yelling at them to show that they're actually radical, the Republicans would answer with something that would destroy them in a meaningful sense, because they're only and they're allowing them to hang around because they serve a useful function. The moment they assert actual power against like the necessary prerogatives of like this party that is in power, they will just say, okay, fine, a state, every other state doesn't get to vote, and there's nothing that they will be able to do to stop them, because the thing they would need to stop them is the ability to actually mobilize people and get them to do things other than vote every 4 years or contribute to a fucking email solicitation. And the Democrats cannot have that because that party is not led by them.
Well, this works both ways too, because the Democrats can't set a precedent either for action, because then they're going to have to keep doing it. And the Republicans now have set a precedent. So there's not going to be like a toothpaste back. I mean, they've gotten a taste of banning abortion. So, like, even if you, like, got to the point where you packed the courts, like, the states could very well revolt. We were going to have to, like, you know, fire up the tanks and roll them in and finish what Lincoln started.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Florida and Texas aren't going to say, oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, federalism
you changed the rules?
Is this
okay,
wall that we are running into really hard right now.
To that point, though, it's like whether it is packing the court or like, you know, the examples you've spoken about like using the federal government to like directly defy state laws. Like, you know, for instance, like if Joe Biden or a national any national Democrat like went to Texas with like a fucking bag of morning after pills and started handing them out to people, or saying I'm
like a really fun Santa Claus.
Yeah, I'm here to facilitate any woman seeking to terminate their pregnancy. I'm there. I'm here to like you know, to break Texas state law and then essentially dare them to arrest the president or a sitting senator or a congressman. Okay, and like what you said, Matt, this scenario was like, yeah, it's not hard to imagine at all what the Republicans would do to any actual direct defiance of their authority, of this kind of this theocratic tyranny that they've now accrued for themselves. But the thing is, it's sort of like those nightmare scenarios. It's just like, what are you supposed to do? Because they're already doing nightmare scenarios.
It's about acceleration. The Democrats say we're gonna give them permission to do worse stuff. The rejoinder is they don't need permission. But when you do something, there is a direct considered response to your action, and that is, in this kind of context, it's a raise. They're not going to fucking fold. They have a winning hand. They have the fucking nuts. They are not folding that fucking hand. They're going to the river.
Well, let me ask you this though. Like, so I was talking with a friend about this, and I don't believe the will of the people. I think we would all agree the will of the people doesn't determine anything. But this is not a failure of will, because obviously the majority of Americans are to the left of the Supreme Court on abortion. But I do kind of believe in hubris. I do think it's possible that you are going to get women who are like, I have an ectopic pregnancy. The baby will not, there's no baby. I'll die. The baby will die. Can't live outside the uterus. Or, you know, something like, you know, I was violently raped. Do you think, like, you know, women coming, I mean, because again, it would have to reach a critical mass, because, like, obviously the parties don't really care what the people want. But I do believe in hubris. I do believe that they might reach a point where they're like, we're like really losing favor.
Right. Well, I mean, that's what I kind of think they're banking on. Because this is, I mean, we see the same dance with any social issue, with any social conservatism in America for the past 50, 60 years, right? Which is that you start out with things that, like, general silent majority kind of agrees with, or at least passively agrees with. Something that you have a simple majority with among voters who count, more or less, under the current system. But then the problem with inflammatory social conservative rhetoric is you have to keep upping the ante. You have to keep doing worse and worse things. The problem with keeping doing worse and worse things is that eventually you run out of people that no one cares about. You run out of people that no one gives a shit about. Yeah. You start running into people that those voters do care about, that they know, that maybe they are. Mm-hmm. This is
the remaining three people, you know, that you haven't alienated who still vote for you are going to get pissed off.
Right. This is the dance that we've witnessed for generations. Democrats are banking on the idea that they overplay their hand and probably overplay it quicker than we're usually used to. The problem with that is if they're acting like they're not afraid of electoral backlash, what does that tell you? Mm-hmm. we talked about Democrats don't want to up the ante because they're afraid that Republicans will do things that will destroy them. They will in turn up the ante. Well, they're already going to up the ante to that extent. They're already going to up the ante to the extent of like, okay, these votes don't count.
Like Amber, to your point about hubris and like the possibility of something, something becoming a national story that shocks and repels the conscience. I mean, I'm